Part 1. The first day Mia Carter was excited about starting a new school. She'd spent the last few weeks following her dad, Mr. Carter, as he prepared to step into his new role as principal at Oak Ridge Middle School. She had watched as he painted his vision of a nurturing, inclusive environment to the staff. To him, every student mattered, and he was ready to lead with that commitment. Mia couldn't have been prouder of him. Walking through the hallways of Oak Ridge that first morning, Mia felt a swell of excitement and pride. She wore a bright yellow dress, her favorite color, as she headed to her first class, determined to make her own mark at this new school. Mia had heard stories about Ms. Thompson, her English teacher, a strict educator with a reputation for high standards. She was eager to show her love for reading and writing, hoping to make a good impression. When she entered the classroom, though, something felt off. Ms. Thompson's gaze lingered on her a little too long, a sharp, assessing look that Mia couldn't quite place. She brushed it off, assuming Ms. Thompson was just being meticulous about welcoming her new students. As class began, Mia eagerly raised her hand to answer the first question, but Ms. Thompson didn't call on her. This happened again with the next question, and then again with the next. Mia's hand slowly fell to her side as other students were called on. At first, she thought maybe Miss Thompson hadn't seen her, but as the pattern continued, it became clear that Miss Thompson was deliberately overlooking her. Mia tried to shake it off, hoping it was just a coincidence. But as the week went on, Miss Thompson's coldness became more apparent. If Mia made a mistake, Miss Thompson would draw attention to it, sighing loudly and shaking her head as if Mia's errors were a personal affront. One day, Mia stayed after class to ask Miss Thompson for some guidance on a writing assignment. She approached the desk, her voice timid but hopeful. "Miss Thompson, I was wondering if you could help me with my essay. I'm not sure if I'm on the right track." Miss Thompson looked up from her papers, her face expressionless. "If you're struggling, Mia, you might want to consider if this class is the right fit for you. We focus on excellence here, and not everyone can keep up." Mia's face fell. She was a bright student who had always excelled in her classes, and this was the first time a teacher had made her feel so small. She felt a sting of embarrassment, but mostly she felt hurt. Ms. Thompson's words hung in the air, cold and cutting. For a moment, Mia considered speaking up, defending herself, but she decided against it. Instead, she nodded silently and left the room, feeling the weight of Ms. Thompson's dismissal settling heavily on her shoulders. When Mia got home that evening, she found it hard to explain what had happened. Her parents had always told her to stand up for herself, but something about Ms. Thompson's treatment felt different. She wondered if she had done something wrong, or if Ms. Thompson simply didn't like her. As the days passed, Mia's initial excitement for school began to fade. She found herself dreading English class, afraid of the sharp looks and biting comments from Ms. Thompson. She felt isolated, as if no one else understood what she was going through. Despite her growing discomfort, Mia tried her best to keep her spirits up. She focused on her other classes, where she found supportive teachers and new friends. But each time she entered Miss Thompson's room, she felt a familiar knot of anxiety in her stomach. It was in that classroom that Mia's confidence began to waver, where she started to question her abilities and her place in the school. She wondered if Miss Thompson's treatment of her was somehow her fault, but deep down, she knew she hadn't done anything to deserve it. Mia didn't realize that Miss Thompson's behavior was rooted in something far darker than a simple dislike. Miss Thompson saw Mia's presence as an intrusion, a reminder of something she didn't want to face. She resented having a black girl in her class, one who carried herself with dignity and intelligence, one who had the potential to excel. To Miss Thompson, Mia represented a change she wasn't willing to accept, and she took every opportunity to remind Mia of her supposed inferiority. Part 2. The consequences. After the meeting with Mr. Carter, Ms. Thompson maintained a surface-level politeness towards Mia. She greeted her in class and even began acknowledging her answers. To the casual observer, it seemed like the tension had disappeared, but Mia sensed an underlying hostility in Ms. Thompson's behavior. It wasn't the overt dismissal anymore. It was something quieter, colder, and far more insidious. Ms. Thompson's expressions were carefully guarded, her tone restrained, but the message was clear. Her tolerance was begrudging, and her disdain had only deepened. Mia, determined to show resilience, kept her head high. She decided she wouldn't let Miss Thompson's attitude affect her enthusiasm. She threw herself into her studies, excelling in every assignment. But she soon noticed Ms. Thompson's grading was harsher than before. Her papers, filled with insightful analysis and original ideas, were returned with lower than expected scores and vague criticisms. Each comment felt like a small jab, a reminder that Ms. Thompson still held the power to undermine her success. One day, Mia received an assignment back with a grade far lower than she expected. Her heart sank as she read Ms. Thompson's notes in the margins. Weak argument, lack of clarity, not up to the standard. Mia had poured hours into that paper, consulting additional resources, refining her points, and proofreading meticulously. She knew her work was strong, and she felt the injustice acutely. She approached Miss Thompson after class, her voice trembling but resolute. "Miss Thompson, I worked really hard on this essay. Could you help me understand where I went wrong?" Miss Thompson looked at Mia, her eyes cold and calculating. "Mia, sometimes hard work isn't enough. You have to be able to think critically, to understand the material at a deeper level. Frankly, I'm not sure if you're there yet." By the end of the first month, Mia was feeling drained, her bright spirit dimmed by the daily hostility she faced in English class. Her father, Mr. Carter, noticed the change in her demeanor. He saw that she was quieter, less enthusiastic about her schoolwork, and often seemed lost in thought. One evening, he sat down with her, gently asking if everything was okay. Mia hesitated, unsure of how to explain what she was experiencing. She didn't want to burden her father, who was so passionate about making Oak Ridge a better place. She feared that telling him about Miss Thompson's treatment would only add to his stress. But as Mia looked into her father's eyes, she saw the warmth and concern that had always been there. She took a deep breath and began to share her experiences, describing the small, cutting remarks, the dismissive gestures, and the cold looks. Mr. Carter listened intently, his face growing stern as he realized the extent of what his daughter had endured. He felt a surge of anger, but more than that, he felt a deep sadness for the pain Mia had been carrying alone. He wrapped his arms around her, assuring her that he would do whatever it took to protect her and make things right. The next morning, Mr. Carter called a meeting with Miss Thompson. He was calm but firm, asking her to explain her treatment of Mia. Ms. Thompson defended herself, claiming that Mia was simply too sensitive and needed to toughen up if she wanted to succeed. But Mr. Carter saw through her excuses. He knew that this was more than a matter of discipline. It was a matter of respect and fairness. He made it clear that he would not tolerate any form of discrimination or bullying, especially not from a teacher. Miss Thompson looked taken aback, but she quickly composed herself, promising to do better. Mia watched her father confront Miss Thompson, feeling a sense of relief and pride. She knew that she was not alone, that she had someone in her corner who would fight for her. As she walked back to her next class, she felt a renewed sense of hope. She knew that there would be challenges ahead, but she was ready to face them, knowing that she had the strength of her family and the support of those who believed in her. The words cut deeply, but Mia refused to let herself break. She felt anger rising within her, a fierce determination to prove herself. "I believe I met the assignment requirements, Miss Thompson," she replied, her voice steadier now. "If you could point out specific areas where I need improvement, I'd appreciate it." Miss Thompson sighed, her impatience barely concealed. "Mia, you'll have to accept that not everyone is cut out for higher-level analysis. Perhaps you'd do better focusing on simpler tasks rather than trying to challenge yourself beyond your capabilities." Mia felt the sting of humiliation, but she also felt something else, a growing resolve. She realized Miss Thompson's words weren't just about her work. They were about something far more personal, something she could not change about herself. She walked out of the classroom, her head held high, determined not to let Miss Thompson's words define her. That evening, Mia spoke to her father again, recounting the interaction. She tried to mask her hurt, but Mr. Carter could see the pain in her eyes. He was proud of her resilience, but he knew he couldn't stand by while his daughter was subjected to such treatment. He decided it was time to take further action. Mr. Carter requested a formal review of Miss Thompson's grading practices, citing concerns about bias and unfair treatment. He spoke to other parents, gathering stories from students who had faced similar issues with Miss Thompson, though none had experienced her wrath as Mia had. The stories painted a picture of a teacher who used her position to belittle and control, a woman whose prejudice ran deep. The school board began an investigation, reviewing Ms. Thompson's grading records and speaking with students. They found a troubling pattern. Ms. Thompson consistently awarded lower grades to minority students with vague feedback and often impossible to meet standards. The evidence was enough to warrant disciplinary action, and Ms. Thompson was formally reprimanded. However, she remained in her position, albeit with stricter oversight. The investigation brought Mia a measure of satisfaction, but it also exposed her to new challenges. Some students whispered about her in the hallways, calling her the principal's pet and claiming she had used her father's influence to punish Ms. Thompson. Others avoided her, unsure if befriending her would draw Ms. Thompson's ire. Mia felt the weight of the isolation, but she reminded herself that standing up for what was right sometimes came at a cost. Through it all, Mia found solace in her father's unwavering support and in the quiet resilience that grew within her. She realized that Ms. Thompson's attempts to undermine her had only made her stronger, more determined to succeed on her terms. She threw herself into her studies, joining clubs, participating in student council, and building connections with teachers who valued her for her intelligence and integrity. One afternoon, as she was working in the library, she felt a tap on her shoulder. She turned to see a girl named Sarah, a quiet student who often sat at the back of Miss Thompson's class. "Hey, Mia," Sarah said softly, her voice hesitant. "I just wanted to say, I think it's really brave what you did. I've seen the way Miss Thompson treats people, and it's not right. You standing up to her, it's given me the courage to speak up, too." Mia felt a warmth spread through her chest, a reminder that her actions had made a difference. She smiled, reaching out to squeeze Sarah's hand. "Thanks, Sarah. It hasn't been easy, but I think it's important to stand up for ourselves. We deserve to be treated with respect." As they sat together sharing stories of their experiences, Mia felt a renewed sense of purpose. She knew she wasn't alone, that there were others who understood her struggle and stood with her in solidarity. The walls that Miss Thompson had tried to build around Mia had only served to strengthen the connections she was forming with those who shared her values. With each passing day, Mia's confidence grew, and she found herself surrounded by a network of friends who supported her and believed in her potential. She knew there would be more challenges ahead, but she also knew she had the strength to face them, bolstered by the love of her family and the support of those who saw her for who she truly was. And as she continued to navigate the complexities of school life, she remained committed to the values her father had instilled in her: integrity, resilience, and an unwavering belief in the power of kindness. Part 3. The Turning Point. As the semester progressed, the tension in Miss Thompson's classroom remained palpable, but Mia was determined not to let it overshadow her school experience. The whispers and side glances she encountered became a background noise, something she learned to tune out as she focused on her studies and friendships. Each day, she stepped into her other classes with enthusiasm, where her teachers acknowledged her contributions and celebrated her achievements. It was in these spaces that Mia felt truly seen, and she thrived in the supportive environment they provided. One afternoon, while working on a group project in science class, Mia teamed up with Sarah, who had gradually become one of her closest friends. The project involved researching renewable energy sources, a topic Mia was particularly passionate about. They spent hours in the library poring over books and articles, bouncing ideas off each other, and laughing at their inside jokes. As they worked, Sarah opened up about her own struggles with Miss Thompson, sharing how she felt invisible in class. "I never thought about saying anything until I saw you stand up to her," Sarah confessed, her voice filled with admiration. "You made me realize I don't have to just sit back and take it." Mia felt a swell of pride, realizing that her bravery was inspiring others to find their voices. "We have to look out for each other," Mia said, her conviction strong. "If we don't stand together, it's easier for people like Miss Thompson to push us down." They agreed to continue supporting one another, sharing their experiences, and standing up against unfair treatment in the classroom. However, the reprieve in Mia's life was short-lived. A week later, during an impromptu class discussion, Miss Thompson called on Mia. Her tone was curt, almost mocking. "Mia, since you seem to have all the answers, why don't you explain the main theme of this chapter? I'm sure the class would love to hear it from someone so eager to contribute. The snickers of other students filled the room, and Mia felt her heart race. The spotlight was on her, and she could sense the hostility behind Ms. Thompson's words. Swallowing hard, she began to speak, her voice steady as she explained her interpretation of the chapter. But Ms. Thompson interrupted her, twisting Mia's analysis into something trivial. That's not quite what the author intended. Perhaps next time, you should do a little more reading before jumping to conclusions. Mia's cheeks burned with humiliation, but she stood her ground. I believe my interpretation is valid, Miss Thompson. Literature is subjective, and I think it's important to consider different perspectives. For a moment, the room fell silent. Mia's heart pounded in her chest, a mix of fear and determination swirling within her. Miss Thompson glared at her, the tension thickening the air. I appreciate your input, but I would prefer if you reserved your opinions for when you can back them up with evidence. The bell rang, signaling the end of class, and Mia hurriedly gathered her things, her heart racing. As she stepped out into the hallway, she felt a wave of nausea wash over her. Had she gone too far? Had she just solidified Ms. Thompson's disdain for her? That evening, Mia sat with her father recounting the incident. Mr. Carter's expression darkened as she spoke, his protective instincts flaring. You did the right thing, Mia. You stood up for yourself, and that's important. We need to challenge unfair treatment wherever we see it, he said, his voice steady. Encouraged by her father's support, Mia found herself more resolved than ever. She realized that her voice was powerful, and she would not allow Ms. Thompson to diminish her worth. She spent the next few days preparing for a class debate on the same literary themes they had discussed, determined to showcase her understanding and challenge Ms. Thompson's authority with evidence from the text. When the debate day arrived, Mia felt a mixture of excitement and nerves. She stood in front of her classmates, her palms slightly clammy, but her heart was steady. She presented her argument passionately, drawing on the insights she had gathered from her research. As she spoke, she could see some of her classmates nodding, their expressions shifting from apathy to engagement. But Ms. Thompson's response was cold. That's an interesting take, Mia, but it seems you've overlooked some key aspects of the text. Perhaps you should have consulted the original sources more thoroughly, she replied, dismissing Mia's points with a wave of her hand. This time, however, Mia didn't back down. I think it's important to recognize that literature often invites diverse interpretations, and each perspective adds value to our understanding of the text. I appreciate your feedback, Ms. Thompson, but I believe that my analysis holds merit, she responded, her voice unwavering. The class erupted in murmurs, and Mia felt a surge of confidence. She was no longer just a student in Ms. Thompson's class. She was a student who demanded respect. For the first time, she could see the admiration in some of her peers' eyes, a recognition that her voice mattered. After class, as Mia walked to her locker, she felt lighter, almost as if a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. She had stood her ground and refused to let fear silence her. But as she turned the corner, she found herself face to face with Ms. Thompson. The teacher's expression was unreadable, but Mia could sense a shift in the atmosphere. Let's talk, Mia, Ms. Thompson said, her tone sharp. I appreciate your passion, but I think we both know that you're playing a dangerous game. You might want to reconsider how you approach these discussions in the future. Mia felt a chill run down her spine, but she held her ground. I'm just trying to express my perspective, Ms. Thompson. I believe that's what we're supposed to do in class, to share our thoughts and learn from each other. Ms. Thompson's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, Mia felt a flicker of fear. She understood that her words challenged the teacher's authority, and she could sense the animosity bubbling beneath the surface. But she also knew that she had the support of her friends, her family, and her own unwavering spirit. The confrontation marked a turning point in Mia's experience at Oak Ridge. She realized that standing up against the injustices she faced wouldn't come without risks, but it was a risk worth taking. It wasn't just about her anymore. It was about paving the way for others who had felt the sting of Ms. Thompson's harsh judgments. As the weeks rolled on, Mia became a beacon of hope for her classmates, inspiring them to embrace their voices and stand up against unfair treatment. With each passing day, Mia's confidence grew. She formed a small group of friends who shared her commitment to advocacy, and together, They began planning a project to raise awareness about the importance of inclusivity and diversity in their school. They organized a presentation for the student body, emphasizing the value of every student's voice and the need for an environment where everyone felt seen and heard. As they worked on the project, Mia felt a sense of belonging wash over her. She was no longer the isolated girl battling a teacher's prejudice. She was part of a community committed to making a difference. The project not only strengthened her friendships but also brought attention to the issues they were facing within the school, sparking discussions that had long been ignored. Through their efforts, they caught the attention of the school administration. Mr. Carter, as principal, was proud of his daughter's initiative and encouraged her to present the project at a school-wide assembly. The excitement in Mia's chest was palpable, but so was the fear of how Ms. Thompson might react. Yet Mia refused to let that fear hold her back. She had come too far to back down now. With each day, she felt the warmth of support from her peers, teachers, and her father. As she prepared for the assembly, she took a moment to reflect on her journey, the struggles she had faced, the moments of doubt, and the incredible strength she had discovered within herself. The day of the assembly arrived, and as Mia stood on stage, she felt a surge of confidence. She looked out into the audience, seeing familiar faces, friends who had stood by her side, and teachers who had encouraged her growth. And then she spotted Miss Thompson in the back, her expression inscrutable. But Mia was undeterred. Mia spoke passionately about the importance of creating an inclusive environment where every student felt valued. She shared her experiences, her challenges, and the lessons she had learned. She spoke about empathy, understanding, and the strength that comes from embracing diversity. As she spoke, she could see heads nodding, the spark of recognition in her classmates' eyes. When she finished, the room erupted in applause, and Mia felt a wave of relief and pride wash over her. She had taken a stand, not just for herself, but for all the students who had felt silenced and marginalized. In that moment, she knew that her voice mattered, and she had the power to inspire change. As the applause faded, Mia caught a glimpse of Ms. Thompson's expression. It was a mix of anger and disbelief, but Mia didn't let it faze her. She had done what she set out to do. She had spoken her truth, and in doing so, she had reclaimed her power. Part 4. The Resolution. The aftermath of the assembly was a whirlwind of emotions for Mia. She received congratulations from her classmates and teachers, their warm words wrapping around her like a comforting blanket. But beneath the surface, she felt a nagging worry about how Ms. Thompson would respond. The teacher had been noticeably silent since the presentation, and Mia could sense that the storm was far from over. As the days went by, Mia noticed subtle shifts in her interactions with Ms. Thompson. The teacher's icy demeanor grew colder, and Mia felt the weight of her gaze every time she walked into the classroom. It was as if Ms. Thompson had transformed into a predator, waiting for the perfect moment to strike back at the student who dared to challenge her authority. The tension in the classroom intensified, but Mia remained resolute, leaning on the support of her friends and family to bolster her spirits. On the last day of the semester, Mia arrived early for her final exam. As she settled into her seat, she couldn't shake the feeling of impending conflict. When Ms. Thompson entered the room, the atmosphere shifted palpably. The teacher's eyes locked onto Mia, a mixture of anger and disdain swirling within them. "Today, we'll have a little chat before the exam begins," Ms. Thompson announced, her voice cold and sharp. "Mia, I think it's time we address your little presentation from the assembly." Mia's heart raced and she felt a lump form in her throat. "Sure, Ms. Thompson, I'm happy to discuss it," she replied, forcing herself to sound calm despite the storm brewing within her. "Your approach was wholly inappropriate," Ms. Thompson continued, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "You took a situation that should have been dealt with privately and turned it into a spectacle. How do you think that reflects on your character?" Mia felt a surge of indignation rise within her. "I believe it reflects my commitment to standing up for what is right. I want to create an environment where everyone feels safe and respected," she countered, her voice steady. Ms. Thompson's expression darkened, and she leaned closer, her tone menacing. "You're playing a dangerous game, Mia. You have no idea what consequences you might face for your actions." Before Mia could respond, the bell rang, signaling the start of the exam. Ms. Thompson straightened, her demeanor shifting instantly. Let's focus on the test, she said, her voice icy. We'll continue this conversation later. Mia took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves as she began the exam. Despite her efforts to concentrate, thoughts of Miss Thompson's threats loomed large in her mind. Would she face disciplinary action? Would her father's position as principal shield her from the repercussions of standing up to the teacher? After the exam, Mia hurried to her locker, her heart pounding with anxiety. As she turned the corner, she collided with Sarah. "Hey, you okay?" Sarah asked, concern etched on her face. "No," Mia admitted, her voice shaky. "I just had a confrontation with Miss Thompson, and I'm really worried about what she might do next." Sarah's expression hardened. "You've got to stand your ground, Mia. You've inspired so many people, and we're all behind you. Don't let her intimidate you." Mia felt a flicker of hope ignite within her. "You're right, I can't let her get to me. I've come too far to turn back now." The rest of the day passed in a blur. As students filed out of classrooms, Mia could hear snippets of conversations about her presentation. She felt a swell of pride knowing that her voice had resonated with others, but the looming threat from Ms. Thompson lingered in the back of her mind. When she arrived home, her father was waiting for her in the living room, a mixture of concern and pride in his eyes. "Mia, I heard from a few teachers about your presentation. You really made an impact," he said, his tone warm and encouraging. "Thanks, Dad. But I had a confrontation with Miss Thompson today, and I'm worried about what she might do to me," Mia confessed, her voice trembling. Mr. Carter's expression hardened. "I want you to know that you have my full support, no matter what happens. You did the right thing, and I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself and others." Feeling bolstered by her father's reassurance, Mia resolved to confront whatever challenges lay ahead with strength and determination. She spent the following days preparing for the new semester, focusing on her advocacy project with her friends and the upcoming community event they had planned to further raise awareness about diversity and inclusion. As the new semester began, the atmosphere in Oak Ridge High School felt different. More students were openly discussing issues of race and equality, inspired by Mia's courageous stand. The principal, Mr. Carter, announced new initiatives aimed at fostering inclusivity, and students felt empowered to voice their concerns and experiences. It was a small victory, but one that filled Mia with hope. However, Ms. Thompson remained a looming presence in the school, and Mia couldn't shake the feeling that a confrontation was inevitable. Despite the changes around her, the tension between them grew more pronounced. Ms. Thompson continued to scrutinize Mia in class, often undermining her contributions and isolating her from group activities. One afternoon, as Mia sat in the library working on her advocacy project, she overheard a group of students discussing Ms. Thompson's behavior. "I can't believe she's still allowed to teach," one student said. "She's so biased and mean to everyone." Mia felt a surge of determination. She knew she had to do something about it. Gathering her friends, she proposed organizing a forum where students could share their experiences with Ms. Thompson and other teachers who perpetuated a toxic environment. It would serve as a platform for their voices to be heard and allow them to advocate for necessary changes in their school. As the forum date approached, Mia's anxiety mounted. Would the students be willing to speak up? Would they face backlash from Ms. Thompson and other faculty members? She couldn't shake the feeling that they were stepping into dangerous territory, but the support she received from her friends and peers was unwavering. Finally, the day of the forum arrived. Mia stood at the front of the auditorium, her heart pounding in her chest as she looked out at the sea of faces. The atmosphere was electric, and she could feel the energy of her classmates buzzing with anticipation. As she opened the forum, she shared her own experiences, detailing the challenges she faced with Ms. Thompson and how important it was for them to unite and demand respect. "We deserve to be treated with dignity and kindness, regardless of our backgrounds," she proclaimed, her voice ringing clear. One by one, students began to share their stories, anonymously at first, but as the discussions progressed, more students found the courage to speak up. They shared tales of prejudice, microaggressions, and the feeling of being overlooked and marginalized. Mia listened intently, her heart aching for her classmates, but she also felt a swell of pride. Together, they were standing up against the injustices they had faced. As the forum came to a close, Mia felt a surge of hope. "We can make a difference," she said, her voice steady, "but we need to continue speaking out and supporting one another. Let's ensure that every student feels valued and respected in our school. After the forum, the school administration took notice. Mr. Carter called for a meeting with the faculty to address the issues raised during the event. Mia felt a sense of accomplishment wash over her, knowing that their voices had been heard. Yet even in the face of these victories, Mia could sense Miss Thompson's resentment simmering just beneath the surface. The tension between them grew more palpable, and Mia prepared herself for a final confrontation. One afternoon, as Mia was cleaning up after a meeting with her advocacy group, she found herself alone in the classroom with Miss Thompson. The atmosphere was tense, and Mia felt her heart race as the teacher approached her. "Mia, we need to talk," Miss Thompson said, her voice icy. "You've stirred up quite a bit of trouble in this school, and it's time for you to learn your place." Mia straightened her back, refusing to back down. "I'm not going to let you intimidate me, Miss Thompson. I have every right to speak out against the injustices I've faced, and I won't apologize for it." Ms. Thompson's expression darkened, and for a moment Mia felt a flicker of fear. "You think you can just come in here and undermine my authority? You're a child, and you have no idea how the real world works. You'll learn soon enough." Mia felt her resolve strengthen. "I'm not a child. I'm a student who deserves respect just like everyone else. You may have power in this classroom, but you don't have the power to silence me or anyone else. We will continue to speak out and demand the treatment we deserve." For a moment they stood in silence, the tension thick between them. Then Ms. Thompson turned on her heel, storming out of the classroom, leaving Mia breathless but empowered. With that confrontation, Mia felt as though a weight had been lifted off her shoulders. She had faced her fears and stood her ground, refusing to let anyone dictate her worth or silence her voice. As the semester continued, Mia found strength in her advocacy work and the support of her friends and classmates. By the end of the year, Mia and her advocacy group had made significant strides in raising awareness about racism and promoting inclusivity in their school. The administration implemented new programs and policies aimed at fostering a supportive environment for all students. Mia had become a symbol of strength and resilience, a beacon of hope for those who had felt silenced for far too long. As the school year came to a close, Mia stood outside Oak Ridge High School, surrounded by her friends, feeling a sense of accomplishment. They had faced challenges together and emerged stronger, united by their commitment to change. "I can't believe we made it," Sarah said, grinning from ear to ear. "This is just the beginning, Mia. We've started something amazing here." Mia nodded, her heart swelling with pride. "I know. We've shown that we can make a difference when we stand together." As they celebrated their achievements, Mia knew that the road ahead would not be easy. There would be challenges, but she was ready to face them head on. She had discovered the power of her voice and the strength of community, and she was determined to continue advocating for justice and equality. In the end, Mia realized that her experience with Ms. Thompson had been a catalyst for change, not just for herself, but for the entire school community. She had learned that even in the face of adversity, one voice could spark a movement, and together they could create a brighter future. With renewed hope and determination, Mia took a deep breath, ready to embark on the next chapter of her journey, one filled with promise, courage, and the unwavering belief that change was possible. And as she looked ahead, she knew that she would continue to fight for what was right, not just for herself, but for every student who had ever felt invisible.